Hello everyone and welcome to SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you do subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. I'm delighted today to be joined by Sandeep Seeripat, Global Business Transformation and Technology Officer at Twinings. So welcome Sandeep.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's our pleasure. And today is the latest in our series of interviews with senior leaders in the SAP community to hear about their career, tips for getting ahead, and any challenges they may have faced. And just before we get into that, Sandeep, for today's icebreaker, a little, I think, aligned with your organisation, what's the best biscuit, in your opinion, to dunk into a cup of tea? I always remember that Peter Kay sketch, isn't it? That the rich tea, it's floppy, hobnob, dunk me.
So, Craig, I'm going to disappoint probably the entire nation. But to me, the thought of dunking biscuit into my tea is just an absolute no-no. So I don't dunk. I mean, I'm probably the anomaly in all of that, but for me, my tea needs to be pure, my biscuit needs to be pure, and the two can come together in my mouth, not in my tea. So I am probably the exception to that rule. All my friends know that when everybody wants to dunk, no, guys, there's the tea, it's purity, there's the biscuit, there's purity, let my mouth do the work. So I'm not a dunker.
I actually do like that answer because, yes, it does pure, and then, of course, when you get to the bottom, you don't have any bits.
And that's the thing. I hate to see my tea kind of having all of these things on it. To me, the tea needs to be a pure set of things that I need to enjoy. The biscuit needs to enjoy it and let my mouth and tongue do the magic.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that. And I suppose I am a tea lover, but I don't mind a jammy dodger dunked in there. But anyway, moving swiftly on. To start things off, could you share a little bit about your background and what led you to a career in IT?
Sure. So going way back memory lane now. I'm an engineer by qualification, so mechanical engineer by qualification. And I started my career working in a production facility. And as you kind of work as an engineer, you start realizing that machines have a certain capability that only can be designed so far. And then you got to put some tech on top of it to make it more efficient. And so I switched very early in my career from being a pure mechanical engineer to a technologist. And I remember my first SAP implementation was many years ago as a plant engineer. My first module was plant maintenance. And I was really intrigued around how do you use this thing called SAP? Never heard of what SAP was back in the day. I remember it was R2, so it was like way back in the day. So it was kind of, back in the time, it was the thing out there. And what's really fascinating for me in the start of the journey is that they were not looking for somebody who understood tech. I mean, the only thing I knew was how to spell SAP. That was about it. But what I was really good at was being able to take the tech and be able to connect it back to a business problem. And I always describe myself as much as I'm a technologist at heart, I'm a business person, first and foremost. I solve business problems. And my journey has been that's been the theme throughout my entire journey. I went from there, I worked in a number of large organizations throughout my career in various roles. And I think the unique part of my career has been I was that consultant, I was that business analyst, I was that project manager, I was that program director, I was that developer. I kind of did the spectrum of things that in a traditional IT career, people might have done pieces of it. I've done the whole lot. So it gives me a different perspective, while at the same time not losing the passion that I have, which is it is a business problem that we're trying to solve. So that's been my kind of North Star around what's the business problem, and then we figure out what's the tech to support that.
Oh, thank you. And so you're Chief Transformation Technology Officer at Twinings. Can you explain a little about your role today and what your main priorities are as a technology and transformation leader?
Sure. When I took on this role, one of the challenges we had is that we were starting this program called Optimus. And Optimus was a program that was going to transform our organization. Now, it sounds like everybody says, transformations rolls off the tongue. But for us, it wasn't just roll off the tongue. It was a clear mandate that we wanted to have to be able to, how do we make this a true transformation? And so throughout all of my presentations I've done to various organizations and podcasts and so forth, I've never spoke about it as an ERP. Because if you really want to talk about transformation, then you need to figure out what's the business transformation. And for us, the journey started off from saying, well, we wanted to be able to connect our various businesses together. We wanted to be able to find efficiencies in the processes that are not competitive for us. We wanted to use data to be able to drive all of those things became the foundation of what we wanted to do, which is we want to be able to delight our consumer. We want to be able to increase our revenue. We want to be able to ensure that we find how tech can accelerate a lot of things, and security being one of them. So those were kind of the things that we said we wanted to do. Now, to enable that, what we said was we needed technology. And then we went out to market to be able to do. So my role is basically, again, coming back to that very consistent theme in my career, which is what's the business problem we were trying to solve? And the business problem is we wanted to transform Twinings. And the second piece of that is around how do you do that? It was through using SAP and the platform that it brought to the table.
Oh, thank you. And I really like that as, when we look at transformations and we're talking to our members and we're looking at SAP customers and trying to help them on that journey, it goes back to that question all the time: what is the business problem we're trying to solve here? What business outcomes do we want? And it's not an IT transformation, it's a business transformation, underpinned, like you said, from IT as an enabler.
Correct.
So looking back, what was your journey into senior leadership like? And were there any pivotal moments for you that shaped how you lead today?
I don't think we have enough time to go through every one of those things, but if I kind of go back and I've had moments in my life where they've been quite defining moments that have helped define who I am at the moment. And one of the most defining moments back in the day, and I still, when I'm on these podcasts or even when I did the keynote with you guys, one of the key lessons back in the day was me being able to have a conversation with somebody without having a stammer. So back in the day, I had a stammer, and I remember my principal at the time telling me, "Listen, Sandeep, this is not something that you could do very well, which is do public speaking." And I said, this is something that I don't ever want anybody to tell me that I can't do something. And it started off, and I was a kid when that happened, was I said, well, what's the mindset? I had a choice around letting that define me or me defining what I needed to be. So for me, the first kind of life lesson as opposed to leadership was around, please don't tell me I can't do it. And that was kind of set the bedrock for me to say, well, I'm going to be able to speak to people. In fact, that end of that year in that school, I stood in front of 200 odd kids and made a fool of myself. But you know what? I was okay with that, because don't tell me I can't do it. And that's been a trajectory throughout my life. Is that I love quotes, and if you remember, one of the quotes I love is, "It always seems impossible until it's done." It was a Nelson Mandela quote that I live by in every possible way. So that was my first pivotal moment in my life, and became that muscle memory. And I go throughout my career, and I worked in organizations where they were absolutely ruthless in terms of getting results, which is a positive thing and a negative thing. The positive thing is that it just redefined performance without kind of losing a sense of who you are. And for me, in that part of my career, it was around understanding how do you become a high-performing leader without losing who you are. I think it's very easy to become something that you're not, to meet the organization's criteria or culture and so forth. But to be able to hold true to who you are and then find that mix between organization culture and your own personal values and culture was the next pivotal moment in my life. To say, when I moved on from organization to organization, I was always looking for alignment between my values and the organization's values, my ambitions and the organization's ambitions. So those became my next kind of key thing. The third thing was around, again, how do you become a constant kind of change agent? And that starts off with change within yourself. And so, I love reading, I like exercising, I keep my mind and my body in shape to make sure that when I come to work, I'm the best version of myself. So that became the next kind of theme in my career, is around how do I make sure that this machine that I'm in is working in the best possible way. And the third thing is around how do you make sure that throughout the entire journey, you motivate, you drive, you inspire people, because our jobs are all about people. As much as AI is front and center of everybody's conversations these days, we're still talking about human beings. And being able to know that throughout my entire career, that it is all about people, and how do you get the best out of individuals to drive the outcomes, has been my kind of themes.
Ah, fantastic. I'd just like to touch on quite some real interesting points there. And I think that the first time I heard this was from Anthony Robbins. It may have been somebody else before him, but it's like if you say you can't or if you say you can, you're right, because which one you choose shuts off the part of your brain. So, like you said, don't tell me I can't, I can, and you did.
And it's again, when I think about the program that we've been all of the kind of things I've done in my career, the transformation journeys were always difficult. The transformation by its definition is never easy. Mm-hmm. And so you take a different type of character around saying, do you just force whatever that is in to get it in and you tick the box? Or do you take people on the journey? And taking people on the journey is much, much harder because you could inspire hearts, minds, and inspire yourself. Because, these roles become very, very tough when you start making decisions on a day where the decisions are going to be costing millions of pounds or impacting hundreds of people's lives and so forth. So they have implications. So if you're not kind of really finding a true why that gives you a North Star and then creating that vision and that passion for your team, you fail very quickly. And I think when I reflect on other transformation programs that I've been helping people with and giving them some advice, not knowing the why and then knowing that you've got the muscle to deal with the variability is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And second point was authenticity. I really like that, do not lose who you are, be authentic, bring yourself to whatever challenge or to the office, to wherever. And, the change agent piece as well always brings me back, and I may be going right off piece here, but Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror, probably why I love that song. If you're going to make a change, you change yourself, because you can't change many other things, but you can change you.
Wise words, really, really wise words. Because again, when you're not authentic, people see it. And the worst is when you see it yourself and you come and play this dual role, you're a Jekyll and a Hyde, is never a great place for yourself and for your team. And when you truly believe that you want to change the world and change the organization you're working with, you've got to be true to yourself in that journey.
Yeah, thank you. And we probably won't get the right to do it, but maybe play Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror over the top of that, get Chris, the producer, to do that. But anyway, we'll move on. So you've worked across different roles and sectors during your career, Sandeep. And what advice would you give people looking to broaden their experience or move into more senior roles?
I think the first thing is to figure out what drives you. So I've got a little kind of formula that I apply with my teams over the years, which is I ask the question around what are your strengths, to know exactly what you're really good at. The next question is what's your passion? What's the thing that gets you up in the morning? Because if you figure out what gets you up in the morning, then you can align your strengths to your passion. And the third thing, what gives you joy? Because I think if you start figuring out what gives you joy, what gets you up in the morning, that passion, and then what are your strengths, the intersection of all of this, that is what your career needs to look like to some extent. At least that's been my formula and the formula that I've been using with my teams over the years. And so I think for somebody who's starting off early in their career, I think just being hungry to be curious. I always tell people today, one of the things that we've lost as human beings is we've lost the sense of being naturally curious. When you look at a 4-year-old child, you look at a 1-year-old kid and is always putting stuff in their mouth and always want to know what does that button do and press their finger over there, and mums and dads freak out when that happens. But it's a key part that if you're constantly wanting to know why, and that's the other part of my career that has just been one of those annoying people in my life that even as a kid, why does this work and why does that work and why doesn't that work? When you start losing that curiosity, then I think your career, especially in the tech world, is a very short career. Because if you think about all the changes we've seen in tech over the last 100 years, I have not seen in my career this exponential change happening in the shortest possible time. And they say that AI is going to replace your roles and so forth. I'm less concerned about that. The more part that I'm concerned about is around what's your rate of learning, and what's the other side of it is what's your rate of unlearning. So we always kind of think about you need to learn faster is great, but you also need to unlearn the bad habits that you've learned in the past. And so for anybody starting off in their career today, to me, curiosity has to be that centerpiece of it. You don't need to be an expert. In fact, most people are not experts in it. But you can be curious around the world, curious around your field, and curious about why can't it be better? And if you start off with that basis, then I think you're just building on top of that. That constant wanting to kind of become a better version of yourself from a work context, I think that's going to become the new competitive advantage. Because if everybody's being replaced by AI, how do you step out from the crowd? It's the person that's prepared to learn more, to use it as an advantage, as opposed to being a crutch. And I think, and if you go back through life, you think there are lots of times where technology has been used as a crutch. I think technology, especially AI today, is an accelerator. But for that to happen, you need to accelerate yourself. So my advice to anybody starting a career, be curious, ask why, constantly want to learn, and constantly want to unlearn the things that have been kind of hampering you in your career.
Fantastic. And that be a better version of yourself. Back to that, those 1% improvements. If you can improve 1% day on day, week on week, or whatever, it just brings that better version of yourself to each day. And you mentioned there the obviously exponential kind of acceleration around technology, and that brings out so that from that perspective the role of IT shifted significantly in recent years, and especially with cloud, digital transformation, AI, etc. How do you see the relationship between IT and the wider business evolving?
So it's always been curious, and it's a thing that I make a mistake myself a number of times, which is we always talk about the business and we talk about IT. And for me, in my world, I work for an organization that actually makes tea and makes herbal tea. So I am the business. It's my role inside that is different. And I think a lot of people, including people in my team, and I actually said I do it myself every now and then, is we create this differentiation between what's the role of IT versus the role of business. For me, it's a case of how is IT driving outcomes. It's no different to sales. It's no different to marketing. It's no different to supply chain. It's understanding our role inside this organism called an organization, and then figuring out, well, what is my role in that? So I could be an order taker. I could sit there and say, tell me what you want, we're going to deliver it. I can sit there and tell you, well, let's partner to stuff, which is the journey we've gone through. Or we could co-create together. And for me, the journey we've been in Twinings has been one of co-creation. Because I want to get to a point where nobody gets excited about the internet, but everybody gets excited about a B2C solution. Everybody gets excited about an app that gets created. So it's being utilized as a way to accelerate the true value. To me, the SAP journey has been exactly that. We've got a fantastic base to work from. Now we've got to figure out how do we utilize that base to accelerate the right business problems. It comes back to, again, I could have the best system working fantastically well. If nobody uses it, if nobody understands how to get value out of it, and if we're not generating value out of it, then it's a very shiny toy, a very expensive toy, which for me, is an absolute no-no. So for me, the role of IT is around sitting at the table. Firstly, is a privilege, and I'm fortunate enough to report to the CEO, which gives me a different lens in terms of how we solve problems. The second thing is also shows to our organization, but also to the broader organization, that IT isn't just this back office stuff. It's actually front and center of how we want to drive the business forward and how that business value comes out of it. And there you go. I've used the word business again. So to me, like I said, it's kind of, and I sit with this dilemma all the time, because it's my peers, it's my stakeholders. These are the people that I'm kind of supporting in that journey. Mm-hmm. But the ultimate goal in all of that to me is still to be able to drive value.
Thank you. And on that point, from your perspective, what is the CIO or CTO's role in ensuring technology initiatives genuinely align with business outcomes to keep them away from becoming just IT projects?
I think the role needs to be looking at it around saying, what's the problem you're trying to solve? I think as technologists, we get excited about, well, it's coming to end of life, we need to replace it. And then you get, okay, right, no, that's another IT project. Or you come to a point around saying, hey, this is the latest thing out there, whatever it is, whether it's AI or whether it's machine learning, whatever the case was back in the day. You get excited about that and you go to your stakeholders and say, listen, we need to implement this, because if we don't implement it, we're going to run out of our runway and we're going to be out of business and so forth. So I think we've got to, as a general perspective, there's real things we need to be worrying about and not creating angst. Because as soon as you do that, you create tension inside an organization. And in my organization, being able to level set the tension to say, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the path we're going to do it, and this is what's going to be hard. Because I think we kind of also oversell to some extent the future, and the future looks so bright and so exciting. It's a hard journey. And I think if you can't be honest, again, coming back to true to yourself, to say, this is hard, whatever it is going to be hard. Here's where it's going to be easy, here's going to be hard, and here's where I need your support. Because you can't do this by yourself. Whatever change is, has to have a equal and willing person on the other side of the table to be able to want to listen to you, to be able to be influenced, and to be able to drive that change. Because again, like I said, you can implement all the stuff and nobody uses it. You could give yourself a nice tap on your shoulder and say, job well done, but you haven't achieved anything in terms of that. So for me, my journey within this organization has been, what do we want to achieve? How do we want to achieve it? Why do we want to achieve it in that particular way? And then be able to convince my stakeholders that this is the right thing to do. And to have debates. I think one of the things that we also lose within the IT world is that we keep wanting to say yes to everything. This role isn't about being nice. And in fact, no leadership position is about saying yes to everything. It's about understanding, where do you want to push the boundaries? Where should you not? For example, cybersecurity is an absolute, there's not even a debate. We're going to do certain things. But if you're going to drive a different transformation agenda, what do you bring to the table to convince the stakeholders that that's the right thing to do?
Thank you.
We know our community, but we don't know yours yet. Why not share the benefits of your UKISUG membership with those who don't know about us? The UKISUG referral scheme rewards you for helping to grow and develop our community. You can check out the link in the description to find out more about how you can get involved. Terms and conditions apply. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And relationships, what I'm getting is, there's a lot about relationships and building and collaboration. You mentioned quite earlier on about people, about understanding that it's about people. So from that perspective, how important do you feel collaboration is, both internally across the business and externally with partners, in delivering successful transformation?
I think it's the heart of it, to be honest with you. Because the one thing with certainty, whatever it is, something is going to go wrong, right? So if you walk into any intervention, any project and so forth, and thinking that you're going to have an absolute smooth ride, already you set up for failure. So I think there's a reality check that we all need to go through on saying, this is the new reality. Things are going to go wrong. But if you walk people through the journey around, this is not just throwing problems at you, it's around, how do we solve this together? Because a lot of times it is a partnership, whether it is a partnership with a vendor, or whether it's a partnership with a software provider, or partnership between your stakeholders, your team. Each of these things, every one of these things is about dealing with people. And you can always take up the contract and pull the contract up and say, here's according to the contract. But as soon as you do that, both internally and externally, I think you've lost the battle already. I think if you started with this with a vision, and for us, when we started our Optimus program, I had a very clear vision around what it was and what it was not going to be. And one of the things was this concept of one team. And the concept of one team was that there was no problem that was related to an individual. It was a problem. So I wouldn't say, Craig, there's a problem, you go and fix it. I say, guys, what's the problem? And whether you represented a organization or whether you represented my team, there was no version that we were going to walk out there blaming everybody. Because as soon as you start doing that, it's very easy to start looking for flaws. And you kind of lose the point, which is, what's the problem? So again, come back to that sense of why we were in the room, what are we trying to solve, and why are we trying to get to the outcome? And then having a culture and a mindset of saying it was one team and no blame culture. I think there's been, on reflection, and a number of people that I've chatted to on the program, I think that's been one of the things that was really, really important in our magic ingredients that we've been talking about.
Thank you. And we just touched on their leadership, culture, mindset, and that no blame culture. So you may have already answered this, but I don't know whether we can expand a bit at all. But what behaviours do you think matter most from senior leaders during those large transformation programs around culture, mindset, and leadership?
That's a Big question. So lots of versions there. So one of the things that I remember, and I asked for feedback on a regular basis throughout my entire career. I think it was just, if I wanted to truly live by the version that I want to be a better version of myself. And by the way, one of the behaviors or one of the mindsets we created within my organization is we need to be better than yesterday. And I hold very true to that around how do you just be better than yesterday. So feedback to me was really important, to being able to understand what am I doing, what I'm not doing, why am I doing it, how am I presenting myself, how are people perceiving me. And on programs, people forget the shadow you cast. And that was one of the feedback that my team gave me. They said, when things are tense, we can see it in your mind, you can see it in your face. Share it with us. Tell us what's on your mind, so that we don't kind of think, is it us that's the problem, is it something else? So I learned very quickly that sharing at the right level, because you don't want to share every single problem that you've got, but sharing at the right level around where we are and how we solve it together was, I guess, a very key input. But that only would have happened if I was open to feedback. So I would constantly ask for feedback around what's working, what's not working, how do I improve, so that I can keep course correcting. Because again, if you walk into, for me, when I walked into this program, thinking I had all the answers, it would have been a disaster. Knowing that tomorrow I'm going to do something different because I got feedback, or seeing an outcome that looks different, was important. The second thing is having courage. When I think about leadership journeys, courage is really important. If you don't know, again, come back to why you're doing this, and truly, truly believe in every fiber of your being that this is the right thing to do, then these things will eat you up very quickly. And for me, having the conviction that this is the right thing to do, believing in the outcomes of where we're going to be, because this journey is hard. So you're going to tap into other parts of your psychology that you haven't seen before to get you through the tough times. And there were a number of tough times on the program. That, to me, was the next key skill. The third one is being able to be absolutely clear around how you're going to get there. And that comes back to the vision piece, right? Having the vision, but very quickly you go from vision to, well, what's the plan? And I think we start off with, and I use everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You got to be brave enough to say, well, listen, the plan that you created is not the right plan. And because there's inputs from trusted people like your partners, your team, your stakeholders. When those inputs are given and you are arrogant enough not to listen to it, because that's the plan, I think very quickly you go off the tracks. So that was the next kind of key leadership. The other thing, and I said this before, which is around taking care of yourself. And it doesn't help, and I love this perspective around, they say, when there's an oxygen mask that comes off in the plane and they tell you, put the oxygen mask for yourself first and then put it for your passengers. There's a message in that, because I think we kind of forget that this journey starts off with you. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you've got to be the best version for your team. There's hundreds of thousands of people are depending on you being your best. Not being false, but being your best. And for me, taking care of my mind, my body, my soul, being able to ensure that is also one of the non-negotiables in delivering these programs. It was really critical for me. And I think the last piece, and I'll never forget, I was doing a review with the teams back in India, and we've asked them to do a word cloud and said, well, what's the one word that you would use to describe this program? And I expected everything from it to being tough to difficult to never want to do it again, and the list goes on and on. I sat here and I still can't believe that this was the word that was the number one word that came out. It was fun. And you ask yourself, no transformation program I've been involved in where the consensus around the number of people were halfway around the world, which we were dependent on, used the word fun. And I think it was kind of captured the essence of what we're trying to achieve. It wasn't the blame culture. We were doing some amazing, cool stuff. So from a career perspective, it was really, really kind of out there. We worked in an organization that respected each other. I think Twinings is one of those really unique organizations that we really respect your voice, we respect your opinion, and we hold you to account when you don't deliver to that. So that was unique. And I think the last piece of that is being able to work on a program that was setting a new bar in everything that we did. So, when I reflect on all of those leadership traits, you got to find the way to have fun during the journey.
Thank you. And what you were just talking about there, it kind of also, to me, paves the way for those people earlier in the careers who aspire to move to IT leadership or business leadership, who may not feel confident. Words that you've used there: courage, conviction, have a plan, look after yourself, put yourself first in driving that, but be flexible in that plan. I suppose that maps out what people should think about believing in yourself to start with, but then have the courage and the conviction to put yourself forward.
Absolutely. I think there's enough people in the world who tell you can't do something. There's enough people in the world to say that it's going to fail. And history has told us time and time again, when those that have the courage to step up above it all, and in any leadership position, is the one where change really happens.
Thank you. And finally, Sandeep, looking ahead, what do you think will be the biggest change facing IT and digital leaders over the next 5 years?
I think 5 years is too far in the future. I think I'm worried about what's going to happen in the next 2 years, let alone 5 years. I think the space is evolving at a rate that, like I said, I in my career, I've never seen this degree of change. And I think this change is happening on a number of fronts. One is the cost to do these things, as in the implementation technology, the barrier to entry is almost zero. So the days where you needed to have big tech or big solutions to be able to start your own business or to be able to drive change, AI has been a great leveler in that regard. So that's a worry for us all, because around saying what organization is going to be able to pick up a solution that's going to be able to drive that faster, better, is a concern. That's the first concern. The second concern is that in this rate of change, what are we doing, not jumping after the next new thing that's out there, but being quite deliberate around what's the right things to do. And I'll give you an example. When you think about data, everybody talks about AI is fantastic and stuff, but what it hasn't solved very well is that, garbage in, garbage out. It still just gives you garbage out very quickly, but it's still garbage out, right? So we've been doing an exercise recently around taking all of the documentation, being to analyze it differently. Well, if it's a bad document, AI is not going to make the document any better. All you're going to do is to get to the answer and saying, well, that was the wrong answer in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I think being able to have clear strategy around where you are, where you want to go, and how you want to get there is a path that I think, without getting excited about the tech, get excited about the journey that you're going to be on to be able to get to the outcomes that you want. I think, and I said this about learning and unlearning, I think that's the new skill that's really going to be the differentiators around. If you can't unlearn all those bad practices, or you can't learn about how and what is happening in this world, then I think very quickly you are going to be replaced by some tech, because the tech is doing that faster than you can. For us as human beings, I think, and as leaders, our ability to be able to encourage our teams to be able to build an environment where it's actually okay to fail. Test and learn, but test and learn safely, test and learn fast, and test and learn cheaply is going to be, I think, those kind of the next skills that leaders need to have. And as IT leaders, the one thing that we hate is risk. We manage risk on a day-to-day basis. And suddenly you're not going to be brave enough to say, I'm prepared to take a risk, I'm prepared to try this out, and I know it's going to fail, or the best I'm going to get out of it is I've learned something. That's a whole new rewiring of everything that we've learned as IT leaders. So I think those are the kind of things that I see in the next 2 or 3 years. But in all of this stuff, I think that sense of being naturally curious around what is going to happen and why is it happening and what does it mean for my business is going to be, I think, that magic strength.
Sandeep, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I really do appreciate you joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Craig. Thank you. And I hope some of these kind of lessons learned and the good and the bad of that will help other people as well.
I'm sure they will. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Please make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss any of our future episodes. Until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep it pure.